Before my sister's wedding, I noticed my card was charged for the entire reception. She smirked. You a loser who don't have a family to support. You should cover it. I just smiled and said, then you'll love what comes next. She rolled her eyes. Next day, my phone exploded with 68 missed calls. My parents were yelling. Her new husband was panicking, and she was begging me to fix it. I'd quietly called the venue and pulled my payment. They owed $15,000 by the end of the day or it was cancelled, but then I noticed the charge late one night when I was half asleep, my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I squinted at the screen, trying to make sense of the numbers. $15,000. Gone. My first thought was that my card had been hacked. I scrambled to open my banking app, my heart pounding as I pulled up the transaction details. That's when I saw it. The charge was to the Everly, the high-end banquet hall my sister Amanda had been raving about for months. My stomach sank. I shot up in bed, wide awake now, the glow of my phone screen casting long shadows across my small, cluttered apartment. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I already knew. Amanda had used my card. I tried to calm myself, to think rationally. Maybe this was just a horrible misunderstanding, but as I continued to scroll through my statements, the truth hit me in the face. I found smaller charges as well: catering tastings, flower deposits, even a $500 charge to a bridal boutique. All under my name. That's when it hit me. She had my card information from a few months ago when she forgot her purse at a family dinner and I had picked up the tab. I remembered giving my card to the waiter without thinking twice. She must have taken a picture of it or saved the number. I sat there in the dark, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate, premeditated. She planned this, assuming that I'd just eat the costs because, in her mind, I was the expendable sibling. The one without a wife, without children, without a real family. Just a paycheck with a pulse. The next morning I stormed into my parents' house. Amanda was in the kitchen, flipping through a glossy bridal magazine, her engagement ring catching the morning light like a smug little beacon. My parents sat at the table, quietly sipping coffee. I didn't waste time with small talk. I held up my phone, the list of charges filling the screen. Did you use my card for the wedding? Amanda looked up, barely glancing at my phone before smirking. Of course I did. You're 26, single and childless. What else are you going to spend your money on? You should be happy to help out. You have no one else to support. My parents just kept sipping their coffee, not even blinking. It was like a coordinated ambush. They clearly knew and didn't say anything. I felt my pulse pounding in my temples, my fists clenching at my sides. I stared at them, at the family I had spent years trying to win approval from, the same family that now saw me as nothing more than a walking, talking ATM. I forced a tight, cold smile. Then you'll really like what comes next, I said, turning on my heel and walking out. I walked back to my apartment, my hands shaking. I had never felt so betrayed, so used. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I was done being their doormat, their backup plan. That night I called the banquet hall. I didn't just cancel the payment, I reported it as unauthorized. I made sure to explain the situation clearly, that my card had been used without my permission. They agreed to immediately cancel the transaction and flag the account. Then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, I asked them to put the date back up for booking. The next morning, my phone exploded. 68 missed calls. Amanda, her fiancé, my parents. I let them all go to voicemail, enjoying the panicked, angry messages that piled up. Finally, around noon, Amanda sent a desperate text. Fix this or you'll ruin my wedding. I just smiled. She had no idea. And that was just the beginning. By that afternoon, the panic had clearly set in. Amanda's fiancé, Mark, was the first to show up at my door. I heard the frantic pounding on the wood as I took a long, slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment. I let him knock for a good minute before finally opening the door. He looked like he'd just run a marathon, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool spring air. He didn't even bother to greet me. What the hell, Jeremy? He snapped, his eyes wild. Amanda just called me in tears. What did you do? I leaned against the doorframe, forcing myself to remain calm. I took my money back, Mark. You know, the 15 grand your fiancé stole from me? He stammered, clearly not expecting me to hit back so directly. You can't just... I mean, it was a misunderstanding. Family helps family. I let out a short, bitter laugh. A misunderstanding? So taking my card information without asking and using it to pay for a wedding I wasn't even asked to attend is just a misunderstanding now. He shifted uncomfortably, his shoulders hunching. Look, man, you're her brother. This is her big day. Can't you just let it go? I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest, the old, bitter anger I'd learned to swallow over the years. I pushed it back and let my words come out cold and sharp. No, Mark. I can't. And if you don't pay the balance by the end of the day, the venue is gone. They're already lining up other couples for the date. His face paled, and for a moment I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered Amanda's smug smile, the way my parents had just sat there, complicit in the whole thing, and the pity evaporated. Mark stumbled back a step, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You're going to ruin this for her. He finally managed, his voice shaking. I leaned forward and lowered my voice. No, Mark. She ruined this for herself. I closed the door in his face, feeling a twisted sense of satisfaction as I heard him mutter a curse on the other side. But that wasn't the end of it, of course. About an hour later, my parents showed up, banging on my door like it was some kind of intervention. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and swung it open. My mom burst in first, my dad close behind, both of them looking like they'd rehearsed this ambush on the way over. My mom's face was contorted with a mixture of anger and disbelief, while my dad just looked disappointed, as if I'd let them down by not willingly sacrificing myself for Amanda's fairy tale day. Jeremy, what the hell is this? My mom hissed, shoving her phone in my face. It was a screenshot of the email from the Everly, confirming that the payment had been cancelled and the date was now open to other couples. You're ruining your sister's wedding! I forced myself to breathe slowly, refusing to let her drag me back into that familiar cycle of guilt and obligation. No, I said, my voice cold. She ruined it when she stole my money. My father stepped forward, his jaw clenched. You're overreacting. You don't have a family, Jeremy. You're not married. You don't have kids. What else do you spend your money on? I felt something inside me snap, a last, fraying thread of patience. I met his gaze, my own eyes hard. I spend it on myself, Dad. Because it's my money. And if you think I'm just going to let it go, you've seriously misjudged me. Before they could launch into their next round of attacks, I cut them off. You have until the end of the day to come up with the 15 grand. If you don't, the wedding's off. And that's not my problem. I slammed the door in their faces, my hands shaking as I leaned against it, my heart thundering in my chest. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I expected the chaos to peak after that, but I clearly underestimated my family's capacity for entitlement. The next day I got a text from my cousin Liz, the one relative who actually bothers to stay in touch without asking for anything. She warned me that Amanda had started spinning a wild story about how I was sabotaging her wedding out of jealousy and spite. According to Amanda, I had promised to cover some of the expenses as a gesture of support, and now I was trying to back out at the last minute to ruin her special day. I just shook my head, my anger simmering all over again. I thought about calling her out right then and there, telling the whole family the truth, but I decided to let her dig her own grave a little deeper. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Amanda or my parents. It was my Uncle Robert. Now, my aunt and uncle are a different breed. They're the only ones in my family who've ever treated me like an actual adult, not just a walking bank account. They live a few towns over and don't get involved in the usual family drama, but apparently they had heard about the situation and were driving through my area. About 30 minutes later, I heard a knock at my door, and when I opened it, there they were, my uncle with his no-nonsense stare and my aunt with her arms crossed, clearly ready for a fight. But before they could get inside, I saw another car pull up. It was my parents, with Amanda and Mark behind them. The whole circus had come to my front door. My uncle gave me a quick, knowing look, then stepped aside as my parents rushed past him into my living room, Amanda on the verge of tears. Mark followed, looking as excited as a man on his way to the gallows. Amanda immediately launched into her speech, her voice cracking with manufactured emotion. I can't believe you're doing this to me, Jeremy. I'm your sister. This is my wedding. I held up a hand, cutting her off. You mean the wedding you tried to make me pay for without asking? The one you used my card for without my permission? My aunt snorted, clearly struggling to contain her anger. My uncle, never one for subtlety, just shook his head. Is that true, Amanda? She flinched, her eyes darting between our uncle and me, clearly not expecting to be cornered. She tried to stammer out a denial, but my uncle cut her off. If you didn't have the money for a wedding, you shouldn't have planned one you couldn't afford. My parents, who had braced themselves for another round of moralizing, suddenly looked like they'd swallowed a mouthful of sour lemons. My aunt's eyes narrowed as she stepped forward, her tone sharp. And you too, she said, jabbing a finger at my parents, should be ashamed of yourselves for going along with this. If you can't afford a wedding, you have no right to make your son pay for it. I watched the color drain from Amanda's face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. For once, my parents had no snappy comebacks, no lectures about family duty or sacrifice. They just stood there, shifting uncomfortably under my uncle's withering gaze. My uncle crossed his arms, his eyes fixed on my parents. If you try this again, you can count us out. We won't stand by while you treat Jeremy like a second-class family member. The room fell into a tense, awkward silence, broken only by the low hum of my refrigerator. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying begin to lift. Finally, my uncle turned back to me. Kick them out, Jeremy. You don't owe them anything. I met his gaze, a sudden surge of confidence flooding my chest. I turned to my parents, Amanda and Mark, my jaw set. You heard him. Get out. All of you. They hesitated for a moment, Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I just pointed at the door. One by one, they shuffled out, my mother casting one last wounded glance over her shoulder, as if I had somehow betrayed her by standing up for myself. As the door clicked shut behind them, my aunt took a long, slow breath. She reached out and squeezed my shoulder. You did the right thing, Jeremy. Don't let them make you feel any different. My uncle just nodded, his jaw set, but his eyes a little softer than I'd ever seen them. As they left, I stood in the doorway and watched their car disappear down the street, a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over me. I knew this wasn't the end, though. Amanda wasn't the type to back down quietly, and I had a feeling my parents weren't going to let this go without a fight. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had the upper hand. I should have known Amanda wouldn't go down quietly. The next morning my phone started buzzing again, but this time it wasn't just her or my parents. It was mutual friends, extended family, even a few coworkers who had somehow been drawn into the mess. Amanda had apparently changed tactics and was fully into her wronged bride role. She had posted a long, tearful message on social media, painting me as the bitter, spiteful brother who was trying to ruin her wedding out of jealousy. She talked about how I had promised to help pay for it, and then backed out at the last minute, leaving her and Mark scrambling to save their big day. The mail exploded. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years suddenly crawled out of the woodwork to scold me for being selfish and ungrateful. Old family friends called me out for abandoning my sister in her time of need, and some even suggested that I apologize and make things right. It was all so absurd that I actually laughed. I sat back and scrolled through the flood of outraged comments, my fingers itching to type out the real story. But then I stopped. If Amanda wanted to play this game, I'd let her. I had no intention of defending myself in the court of public opinion, but that didn't mean I was going to just roll over. Instead, I called my uncle. He answered the second ring, his gruff voice immediately cutting through the chaos. Jeremy, I saw the post. Don't worry about it. We're on our way. I blinked. You're coming back? Yep. Your aunt was so mad she almost broke her phone when she read it. We'll be there in 20 minutes later, I heard the rumble of their car pulling up outside. But before they could even get to my door, I heard another set of tires screech to a stop on the street. I looked through the window and felt my stomach turn. It was my parents again, with Amanda and Mark right behind them. I opened the door just as my aunt and uncle reached my porch, my heart pounding in my chest. My parents and Amanda stormed up the steps, their faces contorted with a fresh wave of indignation. Amanda didn't even wait for an invitation. She pushed past my uncle and jabbed her finger in my face. How dare you turn Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda against me? You're tearing this family apart. I barely had time to react before my mother stepped forward, her voice sharp and brittle. Jeremy, you have to fix this. Right now. Your sister is humiliated. Do you realize what you've done? Before I could even form an answer, my uncle stepped between us, his broad shoulders practically filling the doorway. He looked down at Amanda, his face set like granite. Enough. You've dragged Jeremy through enough of your nonsense. Amanda recoiled, her mouth hanging open. She looked to my parents for support, but my aunt cut them off before they could even begin. You've had your say. Now it's our turn. She stepped into my living room, my uncle close behind, and motioned for me to close the door. I did, locking it for good measure. My parents and Amanda stood frozen in the foyer, as if they just walked into a courtroom and realized they were the ones on trial. My uncle turned to face them, his jaw clenched. You've been using Jeremy for years, treating him like a backup plan because he doesn't fit into your perfect little family narrative. Well, that stops now. My mom opened her mouth to protest, but my aunt silenced her with a sharp look. You tried to guilt him into paying for a wedding he didn't want to pay for. You used his card without authorization. And now you're trying to publicly shame him for protecting his own finances? Are you even listening to yourselves? The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Amanda's face had gone from angry red to ghostly white, her fingers twitching as if she wanted to slap someone but couldn't decide who deserved it more. My dad, usually the loudest voice in any argument, just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. For once, he had nothing to say. Finally, my uncle took a step forward, his voice deep and dangerous. You're lucky Jeremy didn't charge you with theft. If you keep this up, you won't just lose your wedding, you'll lose a lot more. With that, my uncle turned and headed for the door, my aunt right behind him. She stopped just long enough to look over her shoulder at me and gave me a small nod of encouragement before they left. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then, without another word, my parents and Amanda walked out of my apartment, their footsteps heavy and defeated. I leaned back against the door as it clicked shut and let out a long, shaky breath. I knew they weren't done. Amanda had too much pride to let this go, and my parents were too stubborn to admit they'd been wrong. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had real allies in my corner. And whatever came next, I was ready. After that last showdown, I thought maybe, just maybe, Amanda and my parents would finally back off. But I should have known better. 2 days later, I came home from work to find my mailbox stuffed with pink envelopes. Wedding invitations. I tore one open and my jaw dropped. It was from Amanda. Not only had she decided to go through with the wedding, but she had doubled down. The invitation contained a line that read, "A family celebration made possible by the generosity and love of our families." I felt my blood pressure rise. She was still spinning the same lie that I had agreed to help pay for her wedding and then tried to back out. I threw the invitation on my kitchen counter and tried to calm down. I couldn't believe her nerve. After everything that had happened, she was still trying to spin the story in her favor, painting me as the villain. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that I had already cut off the money. Without my card, they'd have to come up with the full $15,000 themselves. But then a darker thought crept into my mind. What if they had found a way around it? What if they had somehow managed to reopen the payment line with a banquet hall, or worse, convinced my parents to foot the bill themselves and blame me if it fell through? I grabbed my phone and dialed the banquet hall, my heart pounding. The manager picked up after a few rings, and I forced my voice to remain calm. "Hey, this is Jeremy. I just wanted to confirm that my card is still blocked for the upcoming wedding." The manager hesitated for a moment. "Oh yes, Mr. Matthews. We actually had a call from your sister a few days ago, trying to clear this up, but we explained that there's nothing we can do without your authorization. She, didn't take it very well." I let out a slow, relieved breath. At least this was one thing I didn't have to worry about. I hung up, feeling a little better, but my phone buzzed again almost immediately. It was my uncle. "Jeremy, we just got our invitation," he said, his voice sharp. "What the hell is this nonsense about family support making the wedding possible?" I laughed, the sound coming out bitter and strained. "It's Amanda. She's still trying to play the victim." He sighed, and I could almost see him rubbing his temples on the other end of the line. "All right, well, we'll deal with that. But listen, I just heard from one of your cousins. Amanda's trying to scrape together the rest of the money. She's been hitting up everyone in the family, spinning some sob story about how you're ruining her big day out of spite." I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose. Of course she was. She was probably hoping to guilt enough people into bailing her out at the last minute. "Thanks for the warning, Uncle Robert, I said. I appreciate it. He hesitated for a moment. Just keep your guard up. She's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. I hung up, my mind racing. I knew Amanda, and I knew she wouldn't stop until she'd squeezed every last bit of sympathy and money out of the family. I went to my laptop and quickly typed up a message and sent it to every relative I could think of, from my cousins to distant aunts and uncles. I kept it short and direct, laying out exactly what had happened, how Amanda had used my card without permission, how she and my parents had tried to guilt me into paying for her wedding, and how I had finally put my foot down. I hit send and sat back, my heart still racing. I knew it would stir things up, but I was done letting Amanda control the narrative. If she wanted a war, I was ready to meet her head-on. And for the first time in weeks, I actually felt like I could come out on top of this whole mess. I should have known that Amanda's last move would be a desperate one. 2 days after I sent that email to the family, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My stomach churned as I walked in, my heart pounding in my ears. The place was a mess. My couch cushions had been tossed, drawers left open, papers strewn across the floor. It looked like a scene from a bad crime show. My laptop was missing, along with some other electronics, and when I checked my bedroom, my safe, the one where I kept my passport, some emergency cash, and a backup card had been pried open. I felt a wave of cold rage wash over me. I knew who was behind it. Amanda had crossed the line. I dialed 911, my hands shaking as I tried to keep my voice steady. The operator took my information, and within 15 minutes, 2 officers were at my door, taking pictures and dusting for fingerprints. As I watched them work, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from my uncle. Jeremy, I just heard from one of your cousins. Amanda's been running around telling people that you owe her money and that you're mentally unstable. She's trying to turn the whole family against you. I clenched my jaw, my blood boiling. Now she wasn't just trying to ruin my financial stability, she was trying to destroy my reputation. When the officers finished, one of them turned to me, his expression serious. Do you have any idea who might have done this? Anyone with a motive to hurt you? I nodded, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Yes. My sister. She's desperate. The officer's eyes hardened and he jotted something down in his notebook. We need her information. If we can link her to this, we'll press charges. After they left, I collapsed on my torn couch, my mind racing. I felt like my whole life had been turned upside down, and the people who were supposed to have my back were the ones holding the knife. But then, later that night, I got a call from my uncle. Jeremy, it's done, he said, his tone firm. I had a long talk with your parents. They know what Amanda did, and they're paying for the damages. They don't want a scandal and they don't want to risk the police getting involved. I let out a long breath, the tension in my shoulders easing a little. Thank you, Uncle Robert. I don't know what I'd do without you. He hesitated, his voice softening. Just take care of yourself, boy. You deserve better than this. As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. My parents had chosen to sweep Amanda's mess under the rug, but at least this time they were paying for it. In the end, Amanda got her wedding, but it came at a price. She had burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, and left a trail of resentment in her wake. My parents had to spend tens of thousands of dollars cleaning up her mess, and I had finally drawn a line they couldn't cross. And perhaps for the first time in years, I felt free.